going on, guys? Kalamazi here. It's going to be video 1 of 3, maybe 4, depending on how this all goes, in a series talking about Warlocks and potential Dragonflight returning talents that I like to see in Alpha and Beta. Now, we know about 2 weeks ago, Blizzard had their big Dragonflight unveil trailer, and we saw the new Druid talent trees, which has Convoke in it, some older abilities, some we don't know about, some we do know about, and they mentioned they wanted feedback from other classes and things on certain abilities, talents, traits, everything that people would like to see back potentially in Dragonflight, you know, if things worked out. So this is going to be a series starting with that. Today we're starting off with Affliction, which there are a lot of really awesome abilities that, you know, we're going to talk about. It's like 9 or 10, and then there's a couple that I think are honorable mention. They're ones that I'd love to see back, but I think they're probably too strong potentially. But I don't know. We'll see, because, hey, you know. Now, I do sort of want to apologize, I guess, a bit in advance here, if that's sort of the right way to word this. There's not really a great way to make this video, like, incredibly flashy and presentable. I debated, like, taking the Druid talent tree and adding in, like, Warlock talents in certain spots and making it look all flashy, like, and that would be cool, but I have no idea how they're designed, and would also take a very long time, and I just want to get these videos out, and I don't think people really care that much in the other way. I don't, unfortunately, have any old file footage of Legion or MOP or even like BFA, AF, so I mean, we're just going to read off a list of 10 abilities and talk about why they were good, why they went away, and why they should potentially come back as far as Dragonflight is concerned. So if you guys do see any weak auras or add-ons, profiles in this video you want to grab, all for free on my Twitch, link down below if you want to swing by. And one big shout out to my patrons before we get too far in the video. Thank you for all the support, guys, a million times on Patreon. Really appreciate it. If you're looking at supporting on Patreon, there should be a link up here as well as down in the video description. So with that being said, let's get right into it, starting off with some pretty iconic ones and a couple that they're actually around in, well, Shadowlands right now. Now, the very first ability that I would like to see return for Affliction Warlock Dragonflight is Contagion. Contagion.'s been an ability that I think could have very well, should have possibly come back in early to mid Shadowlands. I mean, Affliction ever since 9.1... 9.1-ish has sort of been lacking when it comes to the single target department. Now, we had Contagion in BFA when Unstable Affliction was our shard spender. So you could have, you know, multiple UAs rolling, I guess 5, depending how many shards you had, and you could have that 10% damage amp on every single target affected by Unstable Affliction. Now, in Shadowlands, Unstable Affliction is limited to 1 target, unless you're in PvP with that weird talent. Doesn't really matter. So, like, even if that was a thing in Shadowlands, I'm pretty sure Contagion wouldn't actually be that OP, but I think it fits if they do want to take the current version of AF further into Dragonflight without, you know, restructuring and removing Rapture and all that. I think it fits the current, like, just the current niche and overall design of Affliction very well, right? You have your 1 Unstable Affliction. It's not a soul shard spender, but number 1, it's another dot. So like you have that funnel kind of, I guess, priority with UA on 1 target. So there's the baseline UA damage. And number 2, it's another dot for Rapture, which also fits that sort of like priority funnel kind of base damage, I guess, profile that AF sort of has in single target. And depending on, you know, if AF is lacking in single target or just in general, I think Contagion fits that very well. You don't have 5 UAs anymore. You have 1, maybe 3 in arenas, but I think it fits that overall playstyle pretty well, and it's just a solid overall, honestly, ability. It's one we've had a lot in the past. We had it in BFA. We had it, I think, in Legion. I'm pretty sure it was a talent, maybe, possibly. I should know that. But it was just a baseline part of UA when it came to BFA, and people sort of forgot about it, but if it was in game right now, I think it would go a pretty decent way in making actually a bit more competitive in single target. But I think it's a cool ability regardless. And whether you're in arenas doing PvP or just in, you know, PvE based content, having that, you know, even more like even more, I guess, pseudo funnel kind of ability, which you're doing more damage to this 1 target in this 1 pack, this prio mob, I think it's cool and it makes sense. And it fits the current version of Affliction, I think, pretty well. So following suit with that, number 2, Malefic Grasp. Malefic Grasp, excuse me, was an ability that we saw in Legion, which came, I believe, in patch 7.1, 7.15, 7.2. It was a talent that was added to the first row. I think it was in the 3rd slot on the far right. It's been many years, but I think I got that sort of right. When channeling Drain Soul, your damage over time effects deal 20% increased damage to the target. And this sort of falls under this the same category and or I guess kind of school as Contagion. It's sort of a funnel kind of based talent, but I think it helps address some of the issues that AF has, at least in my opinion, right now, right? Now, a lot of people want to see Affliction shift back to being a dot-based spec, right? Where you have, you know, your dots doing 90% of your damage. Going back to, you can look at Antorus logs, Affliction locks in Legion, I think it was like 90% of their damage was dots. Agony, Corruption, Siphon Life, Unstable Affliction, and whatever other dot based effect was around back then. There was no Rapture. There was no, like, you know, large channel, like filler based ability, right? It was just dots. So, like, you know, when 90% of your damage is dots on, let's say, a Patrick boss like Garathi Worldbreaker, and you get to a boss like Coven of Shivara with 2 to 3 permanent targets, Affliction Warlock's just 3 times as better as every other class. It doesn't have dots as the majority of their damage, which I think was one of the big issues, which sort of led to some changes to Affliction heading into BFA in Shadowlands of now. So I think, like, this would go a long way in helping address that, right? Because, like, dots theoretically would do more damage if you had a Malefic Grasp kind of ability in single target, but they wouldn't necessarily scale a crazy amount out of control, you know, I guess within reason, because Rapture's a thing now as well, also, which you have to sort of take into account, right? As they did in other previous old council-based cleave fights. Now, yes, Malefic Grasp was indeed from Legion, and so was Antorus, but Afflock was broken back then, right? The issue is with its ability coming back, though, is the fact that it references Drain Soul. And Drain Soul, I mean, you have Shadow Bolt with Nightfall being a talent, or Drain Soul as your filler spell, right? So you can play either or. A good solution, I think, would be maybe just to replace Nightfall with Malefic Grasp if they try and bring this row over to Dragonflight in some way, shape, or form. But I mean, personally, I would like to see a shift back to Drain Soul just being our de facto filler. I think it just works much better for the spec, I think, really as a whole anyways. Shadow Bolt and Nightfall, while cool and sort of iconic, I think it's just sort of missed the mark a bit in Shadowlands. And yeah, wanted to buy Malefic Grasp return. So number 3, an ability we're pretty familiar with actually, is Wrath of Consumption. Now this is also an ability from Legion Afflock. Unsurprisingly, Legion Afflock has a lot of things I wouldn't mind seeing come back. Wrath of Consumption. So this is a part of our artifact weapon. It was an ability that was just built in. It was nerfed, I believe, from 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 at 5 stacks to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because you could double the effect by casting Reap Souls. So it would, with the doubled effect, it'd be 4, 8, 12, 16, and 20. Basic Florida math, but I got it. So we've seen it come back in Shadowlands, obviously. A bit changed. It's on a legendary now, and either Agony or Corruption give a stack, and they give stacks individually and things, but Wrath of Consumption feels like a talent you could put in like a mid-tier row for AF somewhere. You could have it like maybe in like one part of a tree where you have like more of a single target based ability, or like a cleave based ability, and you can give you the choice of taking Wrath, or I guess cleave, like sustained kind of cleave, like ad based fights where Wrath is good, right? Maybe like I want Wrath for Mythic Plus or Dungeons, or I want, like, I don't know, maybe Malefic Grasp or something along those lines for more of a single target kind of raid based encounter, right? I think Wrath, it's a good legendary effect. It was a good Legion artifact weapon effect. I think it's also a very good talent. It would be one that you probably wouldn't like put multiple, I guess you could theoretically put multiple points into it as well, because you had the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% ranks of it back in Legion. It could be a good talent. I don't think it's too strong. I don't think it's to the point where you have to have it on like some kind of special piece of gear like a legendary. I think it goes a long way, and it fits the core toolkit of Affliction, once again, I think pretty well. Whether dots are dealing, you know, majority of our damage or not, even looking at how AF is in Shadowlands right now, they're not the majority of our damage, but it's still played in Mythic Plus to a great extent, because they're still a decent part of it, even with Rapture being, you know, our main charge bender. All right, so number 4, and I want to clarify that these are in no particular order as far as like what I want from the most like to the least, but I will say the ability coming up here is the one I probably want back the most, and it's very rarely talked about. It was an ability, a talent that was converted from an honor talent in a final, 7.25 actually, it says it right here. That is Death's Embrace. Death's Embrace, Agony, Corruption, Unstable Affliction, Seed of Corruption, Phantom Singularity, and Drain Soul, I guess it could be Shadow Bolt now, deal up to 50% increased damage on targets below 35% health. Higher damage increase against lower health targets. Death's Embrace, I loved having this execute ability baked into AF. It just felt so good. You could get it either on your legendary ring in Legion, or you could get it just as a baseline talent, right? But it was super strong. I remember playing it for what 300 wipes or so on Fallen Avatar. Having this like execute based effect for Drain Soul, which also has an execute clause on its own, just baked into it right now, would be super awesome. I loved it. It was an awesome ability in PvE. There are certain fights like I have Ashara, whatever that thing was at the very end. A lot of fights in the raid where execute damage is relevant, which, I mean, it is in most settings anyways, right? But some fights it's even more relevant. I loved having Death's Embrace as a talent. It was around for, like, I think, yeah, half of one patch. In 7.25, it was made into a talent. In 7.3, I think it was pre-patch for BFA, and it was just removed. And it was very odd. It felt almost like a placeholder kind of ability, but even looking at what it affected, every single ability, Agony, Corruption, UA, Seed, Phantom Singularity, and Drain Soul are literally all still abilities that are around right now. And I mean, dots don't do as much damage, but in the end, I mean, you know, depending what is empowered and what isn't, I mean, it would still be a really strong effect to have, especially for stacking it with things like Malefic Grasp and Contagion and maybe Wrath and other effects, right? Death's Embrace was super cool, and it was very synergistic, like I said, with other abilities from Legion, like Contagion, Malefic Grasp, Wrath and Consumption, other damage-based effects, even Reap Souls, I guess increasing damage with Wrath and things. It sort of almost made the spec just feel like whole to me. Maybe I'm a bit too high on it, I don't know, but I loved Death's Embrace. I would love to see that ability come back. That would be super, super cool. It's #1 on my list for Affliction, hands down. It's not even close. So getting into a couple of Azrael abilities here, right? There's a couple. The first one here was actually barely around. It wasn't around for very long. It's Deathbloom. Some might remember Deathbloom from BFA. If your Seed of Corruption detonates early, it deals X additional damage, right? When it comes to these talents, there's going to be some that you probably have that are going to be filler-based talents, right? Some that are like, yeah, it increases your dot damage by, 1%, 2%. That's a bit more relevant. But I feel like you're going to have some that have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ranks. Deathbloom wouldn't, I guess, necessarily be a bad idea. It affects your AoE damage, right? Not a whole lot when it comes to single target, but if given an option of having, let's say, once again, a AoE based ability in the same row and a single target one in a different branch of that row, I think Deathbloom would be pretty suiting. Maybe like maybe putting it like Deathbloom comparatively to Wrath Consumption, which is not single target, but like having an option, having all right, 4 points in Deathbloom, or putting 4 points in Wrath Consumption. It gives you options, it gives you choices, and obviously the numbers could change, numerically and things. But your seed always pops early, anyways, right? There's never any waiting for, for the final tick of the dot to detonate seed, right? So I don't know. It's one of those things, ones I sort of threw in there thinking it might be relevant. I think the more I think about it, it sounds like a decent idea. It's a filler talent, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see where that one goes. I don't hate it though. #6, Wracking Brilliance, if I can put it up here. There we go. Wracking Brilliance. I think this is probably the Azerite trait that came to mind when I mentioned Azerite traits. It was just a good passive trait. Every other shard you spend, I guess your Agony generates, I'm sorry. Agony, by the way. Agony. Keep that in mind. Agony, not other effects. Also increases your intellect by X for 6 seconds. Wracking, which is a good ability. You stack 3 stacks most of the time playing AF. You ran with it. That's pretty much it. It was a good, solid, like, just sort of set it and forget it kind of trait. A solid passive DPS increase. I could easily see Wracking being one of those, like, just side nodes where it's like, yeah, here, it's a couple good abilities here that get 1 stack. Take your pick. And Wracking, I think, would be a very, very solid one to bring heading into Dragonflight as far as like a baseline, just AF, one and done kind of talent goes. So, now speaking of the actual clause in this, every other shard your Agony generates. This might be a bit of a reach. But for #7, it's not Diabolic Helm, but it is the set bonus. Corruption has a chance to generate a soul shard whenever it deals damage as the 2-piece. I believe this is the Nighthold. I believe this is Tuma Sargeras tier set, I believe, correct? Yeah. The 2 set, Corruption has a chance to generate a soul shard whenever it deals damage, and the 4 set, spending a soul shard has a 25% chance to grant you 10% haste for 8 seconds. Now, neither of these abilities are incredibly exciting. It's not like when it procs, you have 4 free raptures to cast, you can, spam, just destroy everything, right? But I remember this ability being a decent thing. I think we played the actual 2 set for a while, I think, mixing 2-piece and 4-piece from certain tiers. The chance for Corruption to give a soul shard was relevant, but the 4-piece, whenever you spent a soul shard, giving you a small chance to grant 10% haste was very strong as well. And that would be even stronger. I guess with Raptor spam, it would be interesting. But a flat 10% haste buff would be pretty, I mean, it's not nothing. Either of these abilities could be one thing that you just see as like a one-of talent, similar to Wracking Brilliance, right? Where just in a side branch, hey, yeah, Corruption can have a small chance to generate a Soul Shard, or spending a shard gives you a small chance to get a baseline haste buff, right? I'm pretty sure when it came to Legion, though, you had a bit of weaving to try and maintain this buff, I think, possibly. It's been a long time. Sort of similar to Cascading Calamity, which would also have been a good trait to come back, but, you know, UA stacking is gone. But I think either of these abilities could be worked into some kind of talent, which would be pretty cool, depending on whatever way they ended up trying to take Affliction heading into Dragonflight. So getting into the last few abilities here, there's 2 left that I think are realistic options, if that's an actual thing. But there's also a few that I think have a low chance of coming back, but certainly need to be mentioned. So when I finish these last 2 off, there's 2 more, just bear with me, okay? So the next ability that, I guess abilities, however you want to word it, is looking at Shadowlands Covenant abilities. People have mentioned a lot, okay, yeah, Shadowlands abilities are relevant. Everybody wants Soul Shape heading into the next expansion. Believe me, I understand. But I think like even Blizzard mentioned that they're looking at certain abilities that thematically, I gotta move my character here, this is too annoying, that thematically would fit the actual, I guess, theme of whatever class you're looking at. And like Soul Shape, unfortunately, as cool as it is, I don't really think fits the theme of Warlock very well. You've seen Druids, for example, who are getting Convoke, or Convoke is an option in their final row talent-wise, right? But there's the 4 class-based abilities, right? Scouring Tithe, Impending Catastrophe, Decimating Bolt, and Soul Rot. Now, Scouring Tithe, I don't think really fits Warlock very well. I don't really think Soul Rot does very much either. Yeah, you do have like the forked Drain Life part of it, which is very nice with ID, as we've seen in a handful of fights this tier and things, but I think that's just a better synergy, and not something that really, like, you know, fits the class a whole lot thematically. Maybe could make a bit of sense, but I think like IC sort of at the same time as well sort of makes sense. I think the biggest ability here that you might see come back as far as like a one-of talent, maybe almost in the final row, depending on the spec and things, could just be Decimating Bolt. The fact that it empowers Drain Soul, Shadow Bolt, or Demon Bolts for Demonology, or Incinerate for Destro, it has that universal applicability, right, for every spec if need be, versus Tithe being a weird like shard generator, IC just being a weird ability just tied to Shadowlands in the first place, and Soul Rot being a weird kind of ability as well. Decimating Bolt fits Warlock. It feels Warlocky, right? It's literally called Decimating Bolt. And the fact that it can also be used across every single spec, Destro, Demo, and AF, I'd almost be surprised if you didn't see it come back. Like, I'd be surprised if it wasn't a thing when it comes to Dragonflight talents. Now, whether it's going to be an ability that every spec has in their talent tree towards the end, or maybe even like a universal class ability, I'm not really sure. But I think Decimating Bolt fits the mold pretty well if they're looking to try and port over a Shadowlands Covenant-based ability or 2. My vote is for Decimating Bolt. So like I said, though, there are 2 honorable mentions that I would feel bad if I left out. By the way, if I did leave out an ability, and it's not one of these final 2 that you've seen in the video, leave it down below in the comment section, because, hey, I'm probably going to make an updated list of this somewhere and post it at some point the closer we get to Dragonflight. But the first one, which is probably has a very small chance of ever coming back, is Soul Flame. Soul Flame. Arcway. First pack. Soul Flame. Scorpion. Tank the boss in the hole and watch the Warlock solo the boss by casting one ability, being Seed of Corruption, and have everybody who's not playing on an $8,000 computer go to 1 FPS for a whole 3.5 minutes. Whenever you kill a target, its soul bursts into flames, dealing spell damage or shadow flame damage to all nearby enemies. Soul Flame, when people think of Affliction Warlock from Legion, even like Affleck in general from the last few years that they haven't played recently, they think of Soul Flame. It's one of those abilities. It's up there with the other ability we're going to mention here in a moment. It's one of those iconic abilities. Warlock just soloing a boss with Soul Flame, getting 1 FPS in Scorpion, Arcway pulls, random just huge AoE pulls that Warlocks, there'd be 1 seed cast, like in Darkheart Thicket. 1 mob would die, and they all would explode just due to Soul Flame. The trait was OP. It was very strong. I wouldn't mind seeing a fixed version of it come back. It does feel like a really good potential trait as far as like being a single target option in one side versus an AoE in the other, if it was tuned properly. If Blizz could tune it, it would be iconic. It would be so awesome to see Soul Flame come back in Dragonflight in some form. which I think they probably could tune it, maybe possibly, to not be 90% of our damage on certain pulls, but as like a sort of like a finisher kind of effect. If you're in Mythic Plus, a mob dies, it AoE Soul Flame. Just one Soul Flame chaining into 2, into 3, into 18, everything dying at once was a bit of a problem in Legion, but you know, Legion Afflock. So the final ability, I guess abilities, however you want to word it, people would lose their mind if I left this out. Soul Swap. Inhales your damage over time effects from the target, preserving their duration. Your next use of Soul Swap within 10 seconds will exhale those dots over time, those dots onto the new target and deal damage equal to their health and shadow damage. This part might have been different. I think this is the PvP version of it. I couldn't find the old tooltip. People know what Soul Swap is. People know what Soul Burn Soul Swap is. Grants the Soul Burn empowerment to your Soul Swap. Soul Swap will instantly apply a Corruption, UA, and Agony to your current target without requiring them to be removed from a previous target. I'm sure I'm not the only one that remembers the 24-second pull timers back in Hellfire Citadel for Afflocks, because you wanted the Soul Burn and empower your Soul Swap, but get your Shard to regen so you can pull it, instantly put all your dots up and start cranking. Soul Burn, Soul Swap, even outside of that, both the abilities here were iconic. They're one of the abilities people think of when they think of old Afflock. It's Soul Swap. The skill ceiling that was around when Soul Swap and Soul Burn, Soul Swap, and dot snapshotting and things were all a thing back then was high. But I think it made for really interesting play for the class in single target and 2 target when you had ad spawning, when you had a Prial mob spawning. And I think that's something that AF sort of has right now, but AF is sort of missing. And to a larger extent, I think a lot of classes are missing that sort of ability that separates, like, you know, that I guess increases the skill ceiling a bit. Soul Swap is like probably the #2 ability I would love to see come back. But this is an ability that a spec is sort of designed around, I sort of feel like. And at the same time, with Rapture being our shard spender and dots not doing all the damage they used to, it could be safer to bring it back, right? Because UA doesn't stack anymore, right? That's not a thing. But at the same time, it probably wouldn't be as strong because dots don't do as much damage as they used to. So there's positives to that and negatives to that. But I'm not the one who has to decide that. That's Blizzard. But Soul Swap, Soul Burn, empowering abilities. Yeah, I want that version of Afflock back. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm really pumped for Dragonflight talent trees to come out. I guess hopefully soon. Blizzard did mention that they didn't give an exact timestamp, but they said that before the actual alpha hits, which I assume is going to be like in a month or 2, I hope and pray, we'd get access to the talent trees early on. Now, this video might not have been the most, how do I word this? The most visually appealing, because I don't have talent trees for Warlocks at this point. I don't have file footage of old Dark Intent, like Soul Burn, Soul Swap play, but I think it hit home. I think the traits we mentioned are relevant, some are iconic, and I think will go a long way in making Affliction, even this version of AF, or a slightly tuned, altered version of AF, feel pretty good, and a spec that people would like to play. So let me know what you guys think of these, these suggestions and talents and abilities and everything in the comment section below. If I missed any you guys think are actually relevant, drop them down there as well. I will be probably making a list of abilities I'd like to see back when, you know, we get closer to Dragonflight release, and maybe even early on in alpha if we're in early, which we were last time. So if I missed anything, drop it down below. I will definitely take it into account. Any questions, drop them down there as well, and I'll be sure to get back to you. And smash the like and sub buttons also while you're down there for the 3rd time. Any weak orders or anything you saw in this video, or any profiles, or if you just want to come by, stream and hang out anytime, feel free to do so. Link down below. And yeah, I want to give one huge shout out to my patrons who are in the video here as well. Once again, thank you for all the support, guys, a million times. I really appreciate it. If you're interested in supporting on Patreon, there should be a link somewhere up here as well as down in the video description below. With that being said, the next video in this series should be the Destruction one, which I'm really pumped about. There's a lot of really cool Destro abilities, which I hope see some return when it comes to Dragonflight. We'll see. But that should be out in a couple days. So if you want to see that also, be sure to check back then. So with all that being said, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you all again soon on stream. Peace.